Let's move on to our third topic, which is an even more interesting topic. So this was a open letter by the CEO of Docker, Paul. No, what was his name? Scott Johnston. Yeah, not Paul Bevan. Paul Bevan's right there.
Scott Johnston.
Yeah, Scott Johnston, CEO of Docker, and he wrote an open letter in regards to shift left or shifting left. What was your view? We'll go into a little bit of the detail there, but just kind of describe briefly what he was saying, Paul.
It was very strange, but it was sort of, I got the sense that he hadn't quite joined the party in terms of what shift left was supposed to be about from a cultural perspective. You know, the idea of shift left being getting everybody involved early in the development cycle, so that you try and sort of, you know, get all the issues out on the table early and get them sorted out, and everybody knows what's going on. And I've maybe described that very badly, but I've got, you know, and I've said this in our CSOPs in previous months, where I think, you know, the term DevOps, it has become capital DEV and a very small OPS. You know, and here was the complete counter to that, which was really saying, you've put all the pressure onto the developers, and all the other operational people and all the other security people keep asking and telling, you know, stuff and trying to pull stuff, and all you're doing is overloading the developers.
Yeah,
you know, it was almost like, hence the sort of shift left, you know, great soundbite, but bad outcomes for developers.
Yeah.
You know, and we've had this debate before. This is the developers. What do developers want to do? They want to develop. They don't want to get involved in this whole other area. It's not in there. So he then tries to justify it by bringing in the Japanese Kanban, you know, environment, you know, the Toyota production system. Fascinating, lovely, very good, and actually doing a bit of work behind it. There's quite a lot of software development teams now use the Kanban board. Not saying they use the whole of the system, but they're certainly using that sort of workflow board to help them identify where, you know, where there are bottlenecks in the system. You know, but the idea, and he put this in the article that said, you know, in the sort of Toyota system, anybody spotting a fault on the production line can stop the production line, whether you are the sort of, not quite the person wielding the broom, but I mean, very nearly. As it passes you on the production line, if you spot a fault, stop it, fix it there, get everybody together and say, where's the problem? And then you sort of can say, right, how do, and that's fine. And Scott in his article was saying, actually what, it was almost saying it's the developers that need to do that. And they're the developers going to look at all the sort of, what's the root cause analysis? Yeah, fine. But if the problem happens further on in the development process, as you're getting into operationalizing what's going on, you can't have the developer saying, hold on a minute, just spotted that's going on over there. So I think he was trying to use the analogy too far, but to me, it came across as shift left didn't work because the flipping operations people, and the security people have made the developers' life hell. We need to go to a developer first environment. Yeah. So I can take the cynical hat now going, yeah, of course you want to do that. But when he started to get into, developers can stop the run at any point, you're going, no. If you get to security or you get to an operator and they see an issue that you need to work back, they stop it and bring everybody in. There's a lot of this, the whole issue of sort of Kaizen, constant improvement, Kanban. He talked about Kanban. He talked about, was it the Gemba mandate. Go to the Gemba mandate. And I thought, not heard that one before, and did some digging around. And he's sort of mangled that a little bit. Gemba is the place where in the Toyota world you go to it, you go to the place, you see what's happening, and you fix it. So the Gemba's a place. And I could not find anything about a Gemba mandate that says now you stop everything. So he was mangling it a bit, but but fundamentally what he was coming back to was no, it's developer first. It was almost like stop hitting us with all this stuff from the sort of shift left. But fundamentally, and the last piece,
sure.
He was arguing that there was too much pull going on from the right-hand side, and getting in the way of doing the development. And actually, Kanban itself is a right-to-left process. It starts with, what's the outcome that you want? What's the output? And you move things to the point you've got nothing left in your visible stack of jobs to be done, and it's all got to the end, but that end is what you put up first. So it's almost like the way you're talking about it, you just leave developers to do their own stuff and hope it reaches the end okay. I just struggled with it, I must admit.
Yeah, you should see the Kanban for my Cloud Therapist channel. That's all I'm going to say. So I got Copilot to kind of summarize the thing for me. They came back with a fairly decent sort of I think paragraph on it. So it said, so this is kind of the details of I obviously will provide links to you guys to have a look at. But it says Scott Johnston, the CEO of Docker, addresses the drawbacks of the shift left approach that has overburdened developers with additional tasks and cognitive load. Instead, he advocates for starting with the developer, understanding their current tools and dependencies, and offering insights and suggestions to reduce risks. Johnston shares his excitement for Docker's pivot to being developer first, and highlights recent innovations like Docker Scout and Docker Testcontainers Cloud. He also expresses enthusiasm for the potential of GenAI to transform software development by automating tasks and improving developers' workflows, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of the summary, the synopsis. Now, I do agree that, we kind of, started a party called DevOps and forgot to invite the ops guys to it. And there has been a lot of shift left movements. Not that I necessarily agree with them. We've had things like DevSecOps, for example. We did the whole DevOps pipeline, then we forgot to actually check it for security. So we were, bringing in code from Stack Overflow and dodgy other sort of sources and never checked what it was actually doing. And then we found actually some of it was, as it was compiled and running on our servers, it was actually doing some cryptocurrency mining somewhere in the background, because that was what it was. That's what that C program or JavaScript was Java code was actually doing. Platform engineering. So that's kind of been the more recent. Now, not everybody admits to it as being a shift left, but essentially it is a shift left, because you're, again, trying to take that burden away from developers of kind of standardizing, their platforms and things like that. And again, we've done platform engineering to death on the channel. So again, I'll try and point you some previous discussions that we've had on that in the past. And then, others have actually talked about things like DevOps modernization. So kind of how can we modernize DevOps itself? So not just take away that platform engineering piece out of it, but actually modernizing DevOps itself. The folks in the cybersecurity space have talked about shifting left their security, and everybody was kind of on this many years ago talking about it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think he's kind of really saying anything that we don't know and largely agree with. I think the problem is not all of these things necessarily, although like I said, I'm not necessarily in the shift left camp. I think I am in the camp in terms of what it's trying to do, but I'm not in his camp in terms of the way that it's doing it and not admitting what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of just saying, oh, we're now going to do this thing called platform engineering. Why are you doing that? We won't say, but if you read certain articles, which I will try and share with you, it will say DevOps is dead, or we got DevOps wrong. But there's very few people who will actually admit that, will actually say that. And I even read an article the other day that said, platform engineering make or break. And I was thinking, whoa, hang on. I thought platform engineering was fixing DevOps. And now you're saying it itself is in peril. So yeah, I'm the approach, I think, the idea is fine. Just admit it and do it and get on with it, rather than kind of say, now we're going to do this movement, without saying why you're doing that movement and why you're abandoning the previous approach. And again, like I said, we've discussed kind of DevOps versus platform engineering on the channel a number of times in the past. So I don't think there's anything new here. I'm not really seeing anything that's being said that we don't, like I said, we don't largely or that we largely or that we disagree with, but we largely agree with it. But the point is that you still need to go back to those fundamental points and say, why are you doing this? Why did we do this whole DevOps thing in the first place? I could see the benefits, but did we actually educate people? Did we actually get enterprises on board? Did we explain that it was going to be so hard to do this? And it was not just a technology shift, but a cultural shift,
yeah.
to do DevOps. And again, I had this conversation the other day, and again, we've discussed this kind of barrier of kind of getting into DevOps and reaching that, what I would call a stage 3 sort of migration, to cloud and cloud native and so on. So yeah, okay, I mean, you can do that, and you can mention a couple of other tools, new tools, and you kind of want to advertise those, Docker Scout and Docker Testcontainers, cloud, whatever. That's fine. They're all there to enhance supply chain, SBOM, and stuff like that. But again, isn't that going to clash with, GitLab and Circle CI and all these other established players? Because they surely already do this in their pipelines.
I mean, you're never going to stop that sort of clash of different tools and different ideologies, even in terms of development. And I just felt the whole thing was, he was almost trying to tell ops and sec and everybody else to butt out. Butt out, guys. We're the developers. We start here. Never mind shift left. He says, we're so far left, we can't go anywhere else. We don't want you to join us. Yeah. If I was being really cynical, I think that's probably a bit too far. But no, there was nothing particularly new. But again, his use of the Kanban and mangling some other parts of the Kanban process a little bit, I just, as a non-IT guy, got me slightly sort of worked up.
Yeah, and it's like I said, so it's kind of extols the virtues of developers, and kind of the we've talked, I think, before briefly. Let me just find the developer burden and cognitive overload and blah blah blah. I think they, I'm not sure what these developers are. They sort of soy milk drinkers or beta males or something. I'm not really sure, but I mean, we shouldn't be really wrapping people in cotton wool. I think.
You're going neocon in your old age.
I am a little bit, yeah. So, well, the world's going that way, so we should really
move with the times.
Yeah, move with the times, Paul. Exactly. So, so I think like I said, I agree with the sort of, with the points, that he's making all those things clear as mud in certain areas of the letter. The overall sentiment I agree with, but I don't know what makes developers kind of worthy of controlling all of these things and making these sort of decisions. I really don't. That's kind of the bit that I don't really agree. Yeah. I've never really seen that. Even when DevOps was kind of coming on board, I was probably against.
The whole idea was that, as I read it, was DevOps you'd almost at the start of a project, you get everybody around the table and everybody would understand, where the risks were, what the issues were they needed to address early on, so that the developers, when they started to develop, didn't suddenly develop something that then had to be amended later on because they wasn't covering off some of the operational or risk or security angles that hadn't, because developers are just going to go, oh, I want to, do the latest, greatest thing, get off and do it and never have to think about those. And, let's not revisit all that, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think the developers started a party, called it DevOps, and they forgot to invite the ops
to
the party. And like I said, while he kind of seems to really have that sort of sympathy for developers, and them sort of getting dumped on so much, I don't necessarily really agree with that. I mean, you guys started this. You wanted to do DevOps, and now you're saying you're overburdened. And then you wanted to do DevOps, now you're saying, but we can't really have the sort of that artistic approach to development. We need to standardize our tools with things like platform engineering. You wanted to do DevOps, and then you said, but we forgot about the security bit. So we need to go shift left back into our pipeline, and then push security back at the beginning. We wanted to do DevOps, and then you forgot about your SBOM, and you wanted to do DevOps, and you forgot about your tool chain and the supply chain, and so it's kind of just on. It just seems to be a very ill-thought way, an ill-advised, ill-conceived way of actually doing things, and then going back and saying, but you know what, we didn't do these things, or it's not really fair to dump all of this on the developer. So here's some tools that will help you, right? Okay, and so how are you going to integrate these tools into someone who's committed to GitLab or someone who's committed to Circle CI? And they, don't forget, those guys also offer these types of things. And while you can kind of argue, the details and the features and functions of each, and whether the Docker Scout does the same thing, as what GitLab does, or Docker's Testcontainers cloud, does it, as well as Circle CI's kind of security. I don't know. That's horses for courses, I guess.
I think it was almost like he wanted to be more relevant further along the pipeline.
I think he wants to have his cake and eat it. Is my bottom line. And if you kind of if you kind of don't understand something, then don't change it in a kind of a knee-jerk reaction way.
I mean, they've created something that's become a standard. It's almost become a commodity.
Yeah.
And I think that's his challenge. He's sitting in a commodity environment, going, how do I play slightly higher up? I would say along the tool chain, but higher up in terms of value, because he's actually created, the one that everybody uses. But it's a commodity now.
And you know what it reminds me of? This whole sort of shift left and this sort of thing. Video games and games consoles in the past, when you bought a game, it came on a CD, it came on a cartridge or whatever, and you'd install it and you'd run it with all the bugs, all the problems, all the crap hidden line removal that it had, and all the sprite bugs and everything else that you had, and you just played the game as it was. You might get lucky that the next batch of the CDs or cartridges might fix a few things, but essentially you had to commit to that code, and you shipped that code once. And that was it. There was no patches. There was no opportunity for updates. When you got things like hard disk drives and SSDs and internet connections and Wi-Fi connections to the consoles, developers got lazy. They couldn't meet their deadlines because of the overbloated code and all the motion capture and all the other kind of perfection that they wanted to do in the games. So they just shipped it because they needed to meet the deadline for the shipping of the code. And they said, you know what, and we'll fix the patches later on. And essentially, that's what shift left feels like to me. You release your game today because you want to hit a deadline. The gaming community starts complaining about is glitchy, and the characters are falling out of the sky, and there's all sorts of problems that they report on the internet and Reddit and so on. and by the time they've got really heated about it, the software game house releases a patch for the game, and it gets installed on your console and hopefully fixes all of the problems that you're
I love the way you
complaining
said
about.
hopefully. I mean,
Because they don't. Some of them don't. Some of them had released patches and they still don't work.
this is as old as the hills in terms of, the development of the development of software process is that sort of, and whoever invented the term MVP, minimum viable product, needs to be taken out and shot.
Yeah.
Because you see so many products where they're thinking, oh, this will do, this is MVP, it's great, without ever saying what is the minimum viable product to meet the needs and desires of your customers. And you think, oh, for goodness sake, so yes, I'm on the hunt. If anybody can identify the person who first coined the term MVP, I think I'll be knocking on his door.
So it might have been Scott Johnston. Who knows? No, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure there's a lot more clever people out there.
As long as he's not 6'6" and built like Jack, then
ex-SAS guy or something. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.